Snow had fallen hard overnight, covering the small New England town in a clean white sheet that made everything feel hushed and holy. I stood by the window, wrapped in my robe, holding a cup of tea, watching the soft January light stretch across empty streets. The peacefulness outside was soothing, but it couldn't quiet the emptiness I still felt inside after Richard left. That quiet had taken root deep in me. When Richard walked out on us, it was just Julian and me left to figure out life on our own. He was only 4 then, watching the door close behind his father with wide, confused eyes. It was a sound I'd never forget. Still, somehow, we survived. Julian grew into my rock, steadfast, kind, and full of life. At 21 now, he was stepping into adulthood with the kind of grace I admired. He wasn't that little boy anymore, he was becoming his own person, finally at peace with the past we shared. Inside, though, I was restless. Dreams I'd long ignored were waking up again. They whispered to me late at night, pressing me to ask more of life than just getting by. I didn't know what to do with those voices or where they were leading me, but I felt them stirring something I thought I'd buried long ago. The creak of the stairs pulled me from my thoughts. I knew it was Julian before I saw him, his steps had changed lately. There was a new strength in them, a certainty that hadn't been there before. He came into the kitchen wearing warm layers and his camera slung around his shoulder, always ready to capture the world in ways only he seemed to notice. He greeted me with a quiet kiss on the cheek and a, "Good morning, Mom," his voice full of ease and light. The beard he'd grown suited him. He looked like a man now, not just my son. "Where are you headed?" I asked, half expecting the answer. "The lake," he said, eyes lit up. The snows made everything glow. "I want to catch it before it fades." I couldn't help but smile. Julian always had this gift for seeing beauty in what most people overlooked. His photos weren't just pictures, they told stories. They made you feel something. Maybe that's why, in that moment, I surprised myself by asking, "Do you ever feel like there's something you need to say, but don't know how?" Maybe I was asking myself that question, too. Instead of brushing it off, he paused, then smiled. "Come with me, let's shoot together today." I hesitated for just a second before nodding. "Sure," I said, the word feeling bigger than it should have. It wasn't just a walk to the lake. Something unspoken was sitting between us, waiting. We bundled up and stepped out into the biting cold. The snow crunched beneath our boots as we made our way down the street. The wind stung a little, but it also woke me up in a way I hadn't felt in years. The silence of the walk was comfortable, filled only with the sound of our steps and breath. And as we got closer to the lake, I felt something shifting in me, like a door quietly unlocking. When we reached the shoreline, I stopped, stunned. The lake was beautiful, frozen under a silver sky, trees surrounding it like watchful sentries. I hadn't seen anything like that in years. It reminded me of a time when I used to feel alive, not just needed, but wanted. The air was sharp and clean, and for a moment, I could breathe again. The sky above stretched pale and wide, its soft light giving the world a quiet, almost dreamlike tone. Bare trees lined the lake's edge, their branches dressed in frost, glinting faintly in the cold sun like something pulled from a fairy tale. The reflection in the water below made it feel like we were standing on the edge of another world. Julian moved quickly, setting up his camera with care, turning his body this way and that, chasing a frame only he could see. There was something mesmerizing in the way he moved, intent yet graceful, every motion full of quiet passion. I couldn't stop watching him. His face was focused, his hands steady, and in that moment, something inside me stirred. Shadows of Richard passed through my thoughts like ghosts I hadn't fully let go. Not the man who left, but the one I fell in love with, the one who used to see the world the way Julian does now. Then Julian's voice called out, pulling me back. "Mom," he said with a little smile, tilting his head at me like he'd caught me daydreaming. I brushed the snow from my coat, feeling caught in the act. "You remind me of him," I admitted quietly, "the way you throw yourself into your work. It's just like your father used to." I expected the name to cause a shift in him, to bring back some buried anger or pain. But Julian surprised me. He didn't flinch. Instead, his face softened, his eyes steady. "Do you still miss him?" he asked gently. Before I could answer, a flood of memories rose to the surface. I didn't miss Richard, not the man he became. What I missed was the life I once imagined, the one where we were a family, whole and safe. I longed for the version of us that never had the chance to exist. But even through that ache, I found something I hadn't expected, peace. Because losing Richard gave me something else. It gave me more time with Julian. And that, somehow, made the loss bearable. Julian looked at me and for a moment, we didn't need to say anything. His eyes said it all. Then he stepped closer, setting his camera down in the snow. He pulled me into a hug without a word, and I let myself lean into it. His arms were strong, his warmth real, wrapping around me like a promise. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely safe, no doubts, no masks. He whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "I'm glad it's just us." There was no hesitation in his voice, just calm certainty. And in that stillness, I believed him. I felt tears rise suddenly, pressing behind my eyes, but I blinked them away, determined not to let them fall. I whispered back to him, nor would I. We stood there as the early light grew stronger, holding on to the quiet. The snow that had once covered everything began to soften, its sparkle dimming under the warmth of the rising sun. Still, Julian stayed focused, seizing every flicker of light, every fragile detail. There was a shimmer on the ice now, and the edge of the lake shifted, just slightly, as the surface melted near the shore. Along the tree line, faint tracks told the story of a fox passing through before dawn. Nature whispered in quiet patterns, and Julian heard all of it. As I watched him move with such focus, a deep awareness came over me, one that made my chest tighten. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was something more, someone entirely his own. He was an artist, a man, walking his own path, yet still tethered to me by something that time or distance couldn't sever. The bond between us had changed, but it hadn't weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger in its quiet way. On the walk back, I looked over at him. He glanced at me with a hint of a smile, and I couldn't help but return it. The rest of the world seemed to disappear for a moment, and it felt like we were walking through something sacred. "Is that you, Julian?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded once, small but certain, like he understood the weight of the question. "Make me a promise," I said softly. "Everything. Keep looking for the beauty most people miss. That's what the world really needs." He grinned, and his breath curled into little clouds in the cold morning air. "Mom, I promise, I won't let you down." His words hung between us, warm and sure. And as we made our way through the deep snow, something unfamiliar crept over me. Not sadness, not fear, but a shift, subtle and new. Like something inside me had finally turned toward the light. It felt as if spring itself had arrived early, quietly unfolding in the space between us, warming something deep inside me. Julian looked at me with a sly smile, his eyes holding mine in a way that sent a flicker of intrigue through the air. I didn't fully understand what was happening, until I did. "My photos," he began, voice soft but serious, "they've gone unnoticed. Forgotten." There was a heaviness in the way he said it, as if that truth had weighed on him for longer than I realized. I turned my head toward him, brows lifting, genuinely curious. There was something different in his energy now, more grounded, more intense. He suddenly stopped walking. The cold morning air seemed to thicken as he raised his camera and pointed it directly at me. "The most incredible subject," he said, smiling slightly, "has been in front of me all along." I let out a quick laugh and brushed some snow from my coat, trying to shake off the moment. "You mean me?" I asked, half joking. "Julian, I'm hardly what you'd call interesting to look at." He didn't laugh. Instead, there was a pause, brief but weighted, before the camera clicked. He lowered it and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't expected. "You're wrong," he said plainly. "You're striking. You just don't see it. It's not about flawless skin or camera angles, it's about what's real. And you, Mom, you're real." His words caught me off guard. They landed somewhere deep, sending a soft flush to my cheeks, not from the cold, but from something else. I opened my mouth to reply, trying to steady my voice. "You do realize how good you are with words, don't you?" I said, trying to sound casual. He grinned, a playful spark in his eyes. "It's part of my charm," he teased, and then laughed, a genuine, unfiltered kind of laugh that echoed across the snowy yard. We walked back to his house, and he kept snapping pictures along the way, joking and tossing little comments my way that made me laugh harder than I had in a long time. Every silly exchange, every shared smile, added another stitch to the growing thread that connected us more deeply than ever before. By the time we stepped inside, I felt something bubbling up, joy, but also a kind of light-headed giddiness I couldn't quite explain. My face ached from smiling so much. As Julian walked ahead, the steady thump of his boots against the wooden floor echoed through the house like a steady drumbeat. The sound felt like something was about to begin, something I hadn't planned for. I can't wait to show you these, Julian said, eyes shining with excitement as he kicked off his boots. I unwrapped my scarf, letting it slip from my fingers and hang by the door, the room suddenly alive with an undercurrent of anticipation. I have a feeling you'll be captivated, he added with a smirk, but only if I get your approval on the edits first. As he climbed the stairs, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, a blend of mystery and something else I couldn't quite place. Don't be surprised, he called back, if they turn out even better than you imagined. His tone hinted at more than just photos, and it left a curious flutter in my chest. I chuckled softly to myself as I moved around the kitchen, a ripple of amusement warming the air between us. The echoes of our conversation hung in the atmosphere, filled with tenderness. Julian, true to form, soon disappeared from sight, retreating into his creative haven. The rest of the day passed in a strange, gentle quiet. Upstairs, soft music mingled with the click of his camera, rising and falling like waves against the walls. I could feel his intensity, even from below, how deeply he lost himself in his work, every part of him entwined in whatever vision he was chasing. Morning crept in slowly. The scent of fresh coffee drifted into my room, coaxing me from the comfort of dreams. I stretched beneath the covers, reluctant to leave the warmth that shielded me from the sharp chill of a January morning. I was still debating whether to get up when the door creaked open. Julian stood there. He carried a small tray, a steaming mug of coffee, a muffin with a single flickering candle, and a dainty pot of flowers. The sight of it, so simple and full of meaning, stole the breath from my lungs. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, his voice soft, filled with affection. Julian, I whispered, barely able to speak as emotion surged through me like a wave. I sat up, trying, and failing, to contain the rush in my chest. You didn't have to do all this, I said, blinking quickly. He set the tray gently in my lap. Of course I did. You deserve every bit of it. He perched at the edge of the bed, watching me with quiet pride as I took a slow sip of coffee. Steam curled into the air, trailing upward as I leaned forward and blew out the candle, casting the room in a velvet hush. And just like that, the moment felt wrapped in its own kind of magic. It was exactly as it needed to be, no grand fanfare, just the right amount of wonder to make everything feel new again. Time slipped away in a blur, each hour stitched with laughter and pockets of calm silence. Evening settled like a hush over the house, blanketing the rooms in that familiar quiet I had come to embrace. Drawn to the solitude, I curled up on the couch with a book, letting its words pull me gently away from the world. It was just before midnight when I heard the faint creak of footsteps, Julian's, descending the stairs. His movement was barely a whisper against the stillness, but it pulled my attention instantly. He stepped into the living room, cradling a sleek black box in his hands, its surface gleaming softly under the low lamplight. His face was unreadable, calm and collected, yet his eyes betrayed him, alight with a joyous spark that tugged at the corners of his lips. He stood before me, his expression dancing somewhere between reverence and mischief. Mom, for your birthday, he began, I have one more surprise for you. I marked my page and set the book aside, smiling. Julian, you've done more than enough already. What is this? The box in his hands felt like a secret waiting to unfold. Open it, he said, the mischief in his voice unmistakable. Curious, I lifted the lid carefully. Layers of delicate tissue paper unfolded like petals, each one rustling softly, whispering of what hid beneath. Nestled inside was a beautifully wrapped gift box, a luxuriously soft scarf, and a handwritten note from Julian. Beneath that, a satin robe so inviting to the touch it made me pause, fingers suspended over it, heart stilled. Julian, I whispered, his name catching in my throat. This is enchanting. But he interrupted, a stormy grin spreading across his face. That's not all. Slip it on, and ascend. Trust me. A flicker of hesitation gripped me, doubt tugging at the corners of my thoughts, but his excitement was infectious, unapologetically so. It was impossible not to be swept up in it. And so, with a tentative smile and trembling resolve, I nodded. Yes. Cradling the box against my chest, I walked to my room, my heartbeat a steady drum against my ribs. After slipping into the warm fleece robe, its fabric wrapping around me like comfort spun into cloth, I climbed the stairs, each step a blend of nerves and electric curiosity, ready to face whatever waited beyond. As I slowly pushed open Julian's door, a hush settled around me like a velvet curtain falling over the senses. The room breathed a deep, intoxicating red, the glow from fabric-draped lamps casting shifting shadows that danced seductively across the walls. At the center, a polished metal pole reached upward like a silent sentinel, shimmering in the light and pulsing with silent promise. In one corner, a small machine exhaled slow curls of smoke that rose and twisted into the air, delicate and ghost-like, like forgotten secrets being stirred awake. My eyes drifted to a black leather cap mask laid neatly on a nearby table, elegant, provocative, its presence stirring something deep and unspoken within me. Julian's gaze met mine, calm and unreadable, but the camera in his hand gave him away. It trembled ever so slightly with the thrill of intention. "You look fantastic," he murmured warmly, stepping closer. With an unhurried grace, he extended the mask toward me. His voice was low, coaxing, tinged with a breathless urgency. "I hope it fits. You've always loved soft things." There was a reverence in his tone that made the moment stretch, suspended in emotion and mystery. "The images will reveal a beauty that surpasses what the eye can see." My hesitancy lingered, but the curve of his smile disarmed me, gentle, almost tender, a warmth that wrapped around my doubts and quieted them. "Just for fun," he whispered, as if inviting me into a secret world meant only for the two of us. "You've always been there for everyone. Let me do this for you." Something in me softened, and so, with a breath both steady and trembling, I took the mask and stepped into the crimson glow. The room pulsed to life. Music, soft at first, then rising, filled the air with an irresistible rhythm. For a fleeting moment, unease flickered in my chest. But Julian's laughter, unfiltered and bright, cut through the tension like sunlight. His encouragement flowed over me like water, easing the stiffness from my limbs. Guided by his quiet direction, I moved, not as a performer, but as a woman letting herself be seen, fully, for once. Each click of the shutter marked a moment of rediscovery, each frame charged with something new and luminous. He paused, lowering the camera, and met my eyes with something that looked like awe. "You're a natural," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Your brilliance, it's breathtaking. You may not realize it yet." The unexpected honesty in his voice took me off guard. I searched his eyes, bathed in the low crimson glow that bathed the room like liquid warmth, and felt something shift, quiet, undeniable, and deep. Beneath the curated snapshots of parties and the easy banter of shared laughter, something more intricate shimmered, an unfolding story steeped in longing. It wasn't about photography anymore. It was about the relentless pursuit of intimacy, of seeing and being seen without artifice. As the night breathed on, I surrendered the final vestiges of fear. I let myself trust him. The air thickened with the ambient haze of the smoke machine, wrapping us in something heady and dreamlike. Time melted around the pulse of the music. Each beat pressed itself against my skin, stirring something that had long lay dormant. Joy unfurled inside me in gentle waves, awakening lost pieces I hadn't realized I'd abandoned to the quiet erosion of time. Julian stopped. His eyes found mine again, and this time there was nothing playful in them. Just truth. "Your brilliance is truly captivating," he said, and his voice bore the reverence of someone discovering a sacred thing. "Your confidence, it's buried. But it's still there. It's waiting." I shook my head with a laugh, the sound bright and almost defiant against the thick stillness. "Conceal it, dear Julian," I said, "this doesn't feel like any ordinary Thursday night." My voice was lighter, teasing, but my heart beat with a deeper rhythm now. One I could no longer ignore. He smiled wider, his eyes gleaming with mischief and something softer underneath. "You're talented," he said, voice low and charged. "And you're enjoying this far more than you want to admit." His words tugged a laugh from me, a sound that came from a place deeper than amusement. Not every word he spoke was meant to tease. Some truths wore disguises. Allowing myself to be seen like this was its own kind of paradox, a dance between liberation and raw vulnerability. I teetered on the edge of both, exhilarated and exposed. Then, like a current pulling me under, a memory surged forward, vivid and unexpected. It had been buried beneath the thick folds of motherhood, of duty, of time's silent devouring. His voice called me back. "Do you feel the thrill of this moment?" I crossed my arms with a sly smirk, lifting my chin with defiance and delight. "Have you truly witnessed nothing at all?" I teased, letting the playfulness dance in my eyes. His brow lifted, the glint of curiosity sparking in his gaze. "What other secrets are you keeping buried away?" he asked, voice hushed with invitation. Instead of answering, I slipped off the satin robe, its softness falling away to reveal the intricate lace beneath. The air shifted, my skin prickled as memory and desire converged. "Once," I began, my voice soft but steady, "I immersed myself in the world of heels classes." I met his gaze again. "I suppose you could say I was once very good at being unforgettable." The echoes of long-forgotten movements stirred within me, flickers of muscle memory, sharp and vivid, rising from the past like sparks catching wind. Julian's eyes widened in stunned disbelief, and he instinctively staggered backward, nearly tripping over himself, his camera waving wildly in the air as he tried to regain composure. "You must reveal it to me," he demanded breathlessly, eyes gleaming. "So be it," I replied with a mock solemnity, my voice carrying theatrical weight. "But don't you dare laugh." A palpable thrill coursed between us, electric and daring, as I turned toward the pole, its sleek silver sheen beckoning like an old, forgotten flame. Years had passed, but some parts of the body remember what the mind tries to forget. I slipped off my shoes, the cool floor grounding me for one heartbeat, then another. And then I moved, my fingers wrapped around the pole with instinctual familiarity, and as I pulled myself upward, it felt like I had never truly stopped. My body curved gracefully, almost reverently, into a smooth arch, and in one fluid motion I spun, the world dissolving into a blur of light and heat. Adrenaline surged, flooding my veins like a long-awaited awakening. Julian stood utterly still, the camera dropped to his side, forgotten. I could feel the weight of his gaze not as judgment, but as reverence, witnessing something unexpected, something transformative. I transitioned into a daring cartwheel, my limbs slicing the air with remembered precision, then caught the pole again, launching into a whirlwind fireman spin that filled the room with motion and breath. It was there, all of it, the training, the muscle, the rhythm I once mastered. I had thought it lost to time. But it lived, it surged up inside me with a roar. As I descended, the soft red light played off the silver surface, casting ethereal shadows that shimmered across the walls like a private symphony of movement and memory. My final spin slowed into stillness. I landed with a soft thud, chest heaving, heart racing, not from exertion but exhilaration. When I turned, Julian was thunderously applauding, his grin wide and genuine, eyes shining with astonishment. He rushed toward me, still half in disbelief. "Mom, that was incredible," he breathed. "How was I completely oblivious to your hidden talents?" I let out a breathless laugh, shoulders rising in a shrug. "Because," I said between gasps, the heat of the moment still thrumming in my skin, "some things, even we forget we're capable of." And just like that, a part of me I thought had vanished was reborn, in movement, in light, and in the eyes of someone who had never seen me like this before. It felt like a lifetime had passed, an entire world lived and forgotten, since I last danced freely like that. Before Julian ever entered this world, I'd found pieces of joy in a school gymnasium, a polished pole, and the freedom of movement. I had no idea back then that such fleeting liberation would remain dormant for years, waiting quietly to be remembered. "Well," Julian murmured, his voice softening into something tender, "I'm officially impressed." The timbre of his words had shifted, less teasing now, more reverent. "Wow, you radiate beauty." I blinked, unsure how to respond. There was something in his tone that went beyond flattery, something startlingly sincere. He leaned in gently, his breath feathering against my skin, and pressed a warm kiss to my cheek. A simple gesture, and yet, in that moment, it felt like the entire room folded inward. A quiet explosion of love. Not romantic. No, but something deeper. Soul level. His admiration, his pride, it reached into the corners of me I thought had withered and gone cold. "Julian," I whispered, the word trembling with emotion. "You've already given me more than I ever expected. What else have you been keeping hidden in the shadows of your brilliant mind?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between us filled with something sacred and vast. We stood there, suspended, the air thick with a strange warmth. It wasn't awkward, it was comforting, as though the weight of all our unspoken feelings finally had a place to rest. A truth too tender to articulate aloud. His cheeks still glowed crimson when I looked at him again, shy, almost sheepish, and it made me smile. "I see that blush," I teased, nudging him playfully in the ribs. "Didn't think I'd notice." He laughed, a low, musical sound that wrapped around the moment like a ribbon. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, as if trying to shake the emotion loose. "I just, never expected to be caught feeling this much," he said, half joking, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wet with unshed thoughts. I handed the camera back to him, the weight of it strangely symbolic. And as I leaned closer, close enough to feel the heartbeat in his chest, I whispered with a smile, "Don't feel embarrassed. Vulnerability looks good on you." He nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth curling upward, not in his usual smirk, but in a soft, quiet smile that carried something more. Gratitude, maybe. Or ah, and just like that, a boundary shifted, not broken, not crossed, but evolved. We were no longer mother and child in the simple sense of the words. We were witnesses now, to each other's stories, each other's truths. And in that witnessing, something timeless was born. The hallway felt quieter than usual, like the house itself was holding its breath in the aftermath of something beautiful. I paused outside his door for a moment, hand still resting on the knob, listening to the faint hum of the room behind me. There was laughter in there now, low, private laughter, as Julian reviewed the footage, no doubt reliving the unexpected spectacle I'd offered him. And yet, beneath that laughter, there was something deeper pulsing through both of us. A recognition, of change, of rediscovery, of a connection redefined. I walked slowly to my room, the satin robe whispering softly against my skin with each step. The air carried the faintest trace of smoke and music, like echoes that hadn't quite let go. And in my chest, a warmth bloomed, not from the performance, not from the praise, but from the look in my son's eyes. A look that said, I see you. Not just as a mother, but as a woman, as a whole person, and perhaps, for the first time in years, I had seen myself too. The mirror caught my reflection as I passed, and I paused. The faint flush on my cheeks, the looseness in my smile, the light dancing just behind my eyes, I hadn't looked this alive in a long time. I pressed my fingers against my chest, grounding myself in the rhythm of my heartbeat. Slow, steady, real. I thought of Julian's words, his vulnerability, his gift. And I realized, he hadn't just handed me a robe or a camera. He had handed me permission. To remember who I was before life demanded so much. To move, to feel, to be seen, and for that, I would always be grateful. As this intimate and unexpected journey draws to a close, we're reminded that sometimes, the most powerful moments unfold in the quiet corners of our lives, where creativity, memory, and connection intersect. This story wasn't about perfection, but about rediscovery. About allowing oneself to be seen, not just as a role or a title, but as a whole human being, flawed, radiant, and evolving. Moments like these, though layered and complex, reveal the beautiful unpredictability of the bonds we hold dear. A heartfelt thank you to each one of you who stayed through this emotionally nuanced and deeply personal story. Your time, your engagement, and your openness to stories that stretch the boundaries of comfort and connection mean everything. If this narrative stirred something within you, reflection, discomfort, inspiration, or clarity, then it has served its purpose. We invite you to continue supporting our storytelling journey by subscribing, commenting, and sharing your own truths. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction, created for mature audiences and crafted to explore emotional and psychological complexity. Any resemblance to real individuals or events is purely coincidental. The themes portrayed are intended to evoke thought and dialogue, not to promote or endorse any form of inappropriate relationship, behavior, or boundary crossing. Viewer discretion is advised. If this story moved you, surprised you, or simply made you think, don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button and become part of a community that dares to explore the raw, the real, and the emotionally complex. We share stories that push past surface-level drama and dive into the heart of human experience. Sparkles, subscribe now so you never miss the next unforgettable tale. Bell, turn on notifications to be the first to know when we drop something new. Your support means everything, and your presence helps these stories come alive.